A very good morning to everyone present here. So, Sai International School is back again with its Sai Alumni Talk Series. I, on behalf of Sai International School, welcome you all to today's episode. Dear Pioneers, it's rightly said the early bird catches the worm. As the world jostles to be one among the fittest few who survive to lead, Sai takes to its wings to enhance its comrades to be among the elite and shoot at the stars. In an attempt to believe and make all pioneers dream big, we have been at work steadfastly much before others conceive and stare at the mere idea. Dear pioneers, we have been witnessing a series of relentless sessions led by feathers of glory, and each time the sessions have made us realize that Sai is a cradle stone for superlatives. And we boast about our crown, respected Chairman Sir, who wields limitless willpower to goad an army of achievers. Today, if technology rules the streets, the finance sways the mind, and law directs the steps to contain anarchy. Apparently conspicuous of the essence, here we bring before you the one who has trodden the tracks of both finance and law. A blend of the two does not make a heavier prospect alone, but offers some of the most lucrative career prospects today. So, today in this session, let's welcome Miss Sonali Sarma, a pioneer from the class of 2012. Sonali is currently working as associate at Sardol Amarchand Mangaladas and Co., one of the largest law firms in India. She provides valuable advice to sponsors, strategic investors, lead managers on infrastructure investment trust. Sonali has completed BA LLB from the prestigious National Law School of India University, Bengaluru. She had scored All India rank 59 in CLAT to bag a seat in the topmost NLU of the country. Sonali was the head girl of the school and she had ranked third in the class 12 board examination. She was also the proud recipient of the Emerging Global Pioneer Award. Sonali was also a sports enthusiast and a graceful Kathak dancer. Sonali, we welcome you to your own alma mater. And now I would humbly request our chairman, sir, to kindly say a few words. Sir, please.
Thank you. Hi, Sonali. How are you?
Good, sir. Thank you. How are you?
So sweet to see you, Sonali. You have not changed, Your eyes are the same, and you are, of course, the same. I remember, Sonali, when, a chubby girl was with us to Singapore, me and ma'am, and a lot of students. And in the flight, you had told me when I asked you, what you want to be, you said that I want to be an animal activist. I said, what's that? No, I want to protect animals and I will fight for their justice. I will do law course and I will see that I will bring a change. And I want to bring a change to the quality of life of animals. So I was very, very surprised. I'm a child, thinking of, the rights of animals and fighting for a cause. But those days I could understand that you have a passion and a mission within you. if not for animals, you will definitely fight for a cause. And I also remember the second thing that you said, that money is not my criteria. I will try to give 50% of my time pro bono and work free for people who are not getting proper legal counsel. I hope you remember that, and some you'll definitely implement that. Sonali has been a very, very wonderful child, in the school. The time she spent, she was all along. She was a good debater. She was good in various activities. She did, in the school programs, the events. So she was all around, and she always made her presence felt. And I think I may be wrong, but I think her rank was not 59; it was probably 55. And when I had a discussion with her father. They were feeling that probably this time she may not get into NLU, but next time. I said no. My heart says she will get it, and you will not believe the day it was announced that she has got it. The first call I got from her father that she has got it, and I said yes, I knew she will get it because I could see the amount of hard work she has done. So why I told you this story, small story, children, is if you have that passion and the ambition in life, God and nature will make its ways to see that you get it. And that's what is the law of nature. The law of nature always makes things happen if your desire is strong enough to make it happen. If your desire is actually not strong enough, your efforts are not strong enough. If your efforts are not strong enough, you are one of many. So that's why I tell always my seniors, either be the best or different from the rest, and choice is yours. So I sometimes reframe my sentence and tell, you are the best and you are also different from the rest. Because if you are the best and if you are not different from the rest, again, you are one of many. So I want my seniors to be one and the only one. I want my seniors to be the leaders. I want my seniors to come back to the society and do something which others cannot do or will not do. I want my seniors to come back and train my seniors. My objective of putting science in school was that I had told in 2008 that 10 years hence, means by 2020, I will bring one by one my senior leaders. If you see all my, whatever speeches I gave, always I used to tell 10 years from now, I will bring one by one my senior leaders who are going to make a change to the world. And you would have seen in the last, sessions, uh, you know, I have already brought about 8 to 9 seniors who are bringing change to the world. Now Sonali is one of them, and my endeavor has been to bring from various, domain. One from background, one from computing background, one from law, one from one from various angles, so that it gives a 360-degree reflection of my seniors. It's not that we are for commerce or online or for humanities. We are a complete school, and like people like Sonali are our ambassador. Sonali is one of our strongest ambassadors. Wherever she will go, she will keep the Sai International flag high. With that, I praise Sri Sai. I pray Almighty to bless Sonali, and she fulfills all her dreams of her parents, her own dreams, apart from getting married, of course, and having many children and a big house and car. She will definitely pursue what she had told me, that she is going to give substantial time for the benefit of poor and needy who do not get proper legal counsel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Definitely, pioneers are the best and they are different from the rest. And we can see the pioneers fulfilling your dream and moving ahead in life. Now, Sonali, before we listen to you, I would like all of us to watch a video.
Na 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 यारों जी भर के झीले पल लगता है आजकल दौर अपना आएगा यारों जो खुद पे हो यकीन तो जिंदगी हंसी तुझे कल बुलाएगा यारों जी भर के झीले पल लगता है आजकल दौर अपना आएगा यारों जो खुद पे हो यकीन तो जिंदगी हंसी तुझे कल बुलाएगा है जुनू सा जीने में है जुनू
So, Sonali, do you have this treasure with you? Sai has your treasure trove.
I cannot believe that there are these pictures. I haven't seen half of them. Okay, tearing up was not a part of the plan. Thank you so much. That is a beautiful video montage. I'm so moved.
Yeah, now, Sonali, it's all time is yours. Children are all waiting to listen to you. Over to you, Sonali.
Thank you so much, Chairman sir. You've always been extremely kind to me. I mean, there are no amounts of thank yous that I can ever give to you, which would really make up for the amount and the energy you've invested in each one of us, especially me. I mean, I'm here today because most definitely you pushed me to it. You pushed me to my best potential. And okay, hi everyone. I'm extremely excited to be here today. There are only 40 minutes, so I will try to today at least try to motivate a few of you to take law as a career and try to make it as less boring as possible. And what we're going to do is that this talk would have two parts. I'll start off with a little bit about me, but primarily around how you can approach law as a career and figure out what it is that your options would be if you do end up becoming a lawyer or you end up entering the legal field. So I was extremely lucky. Like Sir said, I was actually very young. In fact, even younger than 11th grade. I was probably in 8th or 9th when I decided that I wanted to be a lawyer. And my entire family has people who are into one or another form of legal expertise. Someone's a law enforcement officer, someone's a judge, someone's a lawyer. So I was always, when I grew up, I sort of heard justice, law and order as the three primary principles of mankind's existence. And that hence, there was this innate need in me all along where I felt that these are three principles which are absolutely essential in a society and must be upheld at all points in time. So when I look at my life, it seems like it was easy, but because I knew it all along. But there were choices that had to be made all along. In 11th grade, to be honest, so I moved to Orissa in 9th, and I studied for a couple of years in another school. But in 11th grade, Sai International School was this upcoming institution which was emerging as a leading institution. It was almost becoming incomparable, out of league and it was fulfilling all check boxes that parents are looking for in a good school, especially for higher secondary education. And Sai International at that point offered to us coaching for CLAT as well. And it was completely out of the box because, as a student, what you were seeing was that you'd be getting really good education for your board examination, and at the same time also be getting a specialized study. So this sort of blend was extremely appealing to a lot of kids who studied with me, and especially me, because I was pretty certain that I wanted to study for CLAT. CLAT is Common Law Admission Test, which is one of the main examinations you take for entrance for your law entrance. very honestly, these photos that you just saw, they pretty much represent everything that I am today, and they're representative of each day that I spent, how it molded my personality, the way I think, the way I greet, the way I speak, and more so things I take a stand in support of and things that I actually oppose. Support being things like gender equality, support, respecting elders, one thing which the school really, really strongly and firmly believed in and ensured that students also inculcated as a value within them. And, and then oppose and things that I oppose, for instance, things like inequality or things like, discrimination. So the school was definitely offering specialized studies with good legal education, with brilliant teachers, extracurricular activities, everything. And you'd think that in 2 years, that's seemingly such a short time, right? But at the end of the day, all of these things combined sort of made me like myself. I ended up respecting the values that were getting inculcated within me. And it is not today that I say these things. And even the little rebellious, younger version of me was always aware of this at the back of my head, that with each passing day, I'm becoming a person that I would like being once I'm grown up. Now, that being said, I joined for good legal courses, of course, for good law coaching and for the studies. I will talk a little bit about what law means to me and why it is something that it's one of those subjects that have the capability of instilling or inspiring a lot of passion. Law as a profession is unique because it is definitely something which can help individuals, groups, and organizations to deal with like a legal problem, to ensure that justice, equity, fairness can be attained, achieved in given circumstances. Now, I know I'm slightly biased, but most definitely I feel that law as a profession has the capability of changing the world. Okay, if that is too big a statement, they're definitely bringing a change in the society, right? For instance, I'm pretty certain if you speak to your older brothers and sisters, cousins, parents, all of them had one opinion of what they thought was right, or what the society thought was right in the 90s, that evolved to another position altogether in the 2000s. Today, things that landmark judgments that you hear from the Supreme Court and different high courts are on subject matters which we couldn't have imagined in the 90s, right? Could you have imagined, for instance, triple talaq getting criminalized? Or there's so many other cases. I will get to that in just a short while. But my point is that if law helps a society evolve, because law is extremely logic oriented, it most definitely helps represent vulnerable sections of the society. They can help represent victims of child labor, forced labor, trafficking, domestic abuse, abuse of the elderly, abuse of the abandoned, abuse of any part of the society or any section of the society which is either vulnerable or weak or is just not at an equal footing when you compare them to others. Caste-based discrimination, inequality when it comes to gender, the huge fight that not just us, we should definitely look at other countries as well. Every society has seen one form of or another of this movement called equal pay for equal work, which is for gender inequality at workplaces, women's rights, suffrage rights, for voting. Now, what law does is not just formulate something, but that there are different aspects of the law, right? It helps you formulate and put forth a legal framework to protect. Then there would be a part of the legal society which would help execute, implement these laws, ensure that these are abided by. And in case they aren't, there would be a third section, which is the judiciary, which ensures that in case there is a violation or in case there's a vulnerable section of the society, be it an individual or be it a group of people, then they are justice is brought to them, right? So basically, everybody who is affected, who's vulnerable, gets an opportunity to be heard, to be seen. That is what law ensures. It ensures adequate remedy. It ensures that everybody is restored back to a good state. For instance, I understand you say that crimes can't be undone, but if someone's been harmed, harmed in a criminal way. But there is one way of remedying it, right? Ensuring that the perpetrator gets punished. Another way, you get compensation, you get money for any form of economic loss that you might have faced. So advocates, lawyers are advisors, and they help you provide solutions to legal issues that could range from any aspect of life. That's the beauty of law. There is no aspect of your life which is not covered by some form of law or the other. Because at the end of the day, we have to be mindful of the fact that we live as a community. We live as a part of a society, and each of us owe something to the other. We definitely owe their sense of space, their sense of privacy, their sense of being. So law ends up regulating every aspect of your life. Hence, there is no aspect which law leaves untouched, and hence there are umpteen number of specializations that one could attain if they take law as a career. Now, while I spoke about the forms of abuse, I spoke about representation of the vulnerable, I will also speak about other forms of law. And for instance, I do capital markets. Now, capital markets is a form of law, is a form of regulation where we ensure that companies which are raising money from the public are abiding by certain acts and regulations, are regulated properly by the Securities and Exchange Board of India, so that there are so that the money that is taken from the public, be it in the form of equity or be it in the form of debt, if they take it as a loan without giving away a part of their company, that does not end up, there is a lot of fraud. If you've heard about the Satyam scam, I know it was ages ago, you all are pretty young for it, but there have been a lot of fraud and embezzlement and where companies have duped people, middle class people who saved their money and then invested in companies just to make that little bit extra after their hard work. That money has been defrauded by non-compliance with good corporate laws, one that ensures that that shareholders' interests are protected. So that is the form of law that I practice. That being said, we'll come to a bunch of other practice areas also. CLAT is one of the exams, but that is not the only exam. There are a bunch of other examinations which each of these institutions hold. For instance, there's a National Law University at Delhi, and there are other law colleges in different parts of the country which either require you to study well in board exams and get good grades in that. Then they also have their own admission tests. So there are a variety of options. From what I hear, there are really, really hardworking career counselors in school. I'm also available. Please feel free to drop me an email and figure out if at all you want to figure out the modalities of how to apply for law. But as I said, as a profession, it's extremely holistic. And other than a social cause, which is my reason for why I joined law, I always thought that at some point in time, right now I do capital markets, but that's the beauty about the law, right? You can actually appreciate, contribute to different aspects. But that is not the only great thing about it. There are so many other pros which could be driving factors for a lot of people. I mean, definitely they were contributing in my choice of profession as well. One would be there is a high earning potential. Now, if there is something that we all want, a good quality of life, right? High earning potential is something which we definitely, lawyers are among the top paid professionals in the country. There is a lot of prestige and respect that comes with it. You're getting an opportunity to help others, work towards equality. So you end up getting a lot of respect. And there are so many fields of law that to ensure that all aspects of a person, of a person's existence as a part of a society gets covered. You could be working. So my point being that there is just not one great thing about the law. Passion should obviously be your primary determining factor when it comes to making a choice, if that is the profession you want to go into. But there are so many other things that come with it, the ones that I just spoke of, that law becomes an extremely lucrative career. Now I will share my screen for a small PPT. Right. So what we'll be discussing here is the kinds of aspects of lawmaking or of law as a profession where you could be making the difference, where you could be contributing. Now, this is not an exhaustive list at all. These are the mostly big picture bucket items that I could sort of shortlist to have to present for you today. The ones on your left, the 4 points, are primarily points around the legal framework itself, putting in place laws or formulation of what would govern a society. And the ones on your right are career aspects that you could be pursuing for implementation thereof or for execution of the laws that are in place. So the first one on the left is policy making or legislative drafting. So this is basically where you formulate a policy or a law, all these acts that exist for protection of women against domestic violence act, industrial disputes act, minimum wages act, acts which are put in place to ensure that is the legal boundary which no individual entity corporation is supposed to transgress, and has to function within the rules that are laid down. So that is what your job is in the first point. Job in the second point, regulatory statutory bodies. Now, a lot of these acts would establish authorities which ensure that certain sectors are regulated. Now, for instance, Securities and Exchange Board of India, SEBI, I'm sure you hear these terms in the news, even if you're not particularly aware of what it is that they exactly do. I'll just take you through them. SEBI basically ensures that markets, the capital markets, money, where there are the stock markets, shares, debentures, all the money that companies are raising, all acts that are applicable to it are applied and are actually enforced. So it's basically a watchdog. So is TRAI, that's Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, which regulates the telecom sector. Insurance Regulatory Development Authority of India, IRDAI, regulates the insurance sector. Then your banking companies and your banks and non-banking financial institutions are governed by your Reserve Bank of India. Now, these are authorities, they're watchdogs. Watchdogs are basically put in place to ensure that each that laws are actually being enforced and that everything is within the framework of within the letter of the law. Now, why I have put this in the drafting side and not in the implementation side is because at the end of the day, they are not like courts. So you don't have to go to them to ensure that they're enforcing it. So as a lawyer, if you're working with any of these authorities, if you're working in the legal division of these authorities or of these statutory bodies, then you're effectively helping formulate the guidelines or sub-rules or bylaws under the main act for regulation of these sectors. Law teaching and academia. You could not be contributing more to a particular profession than you would if you're a teacher. Goes without saying. I'm giving this speech because I went to a good law school with really hardworking professors and who've been teaching law for umpteen number of years, who know everything about the law more than people who actually practice it. So that is for someone who's actually interested. It's actually, it might interest some people who want to work abroad, or people who are actually driven by causes that are slightly larger than one particular society or one particular nation. I actually had the opportunity a couple of years back to intern with the United Nations office at Geneva, where I was working with the Office for the Special Envoy for Syria. Now, the UN and other world organizations end up having these teams head by one leader or who's here designated as the Special Envoy for Syria for these countries that are either in a state of war, or if they're plagued by terrorist activities, or if they're attacked by their neighbors because there's a civil war within. So there are lots of, for instance, the Middle East, Syria, Lebanon. There are so many of these countries which are actually plagued with real-time issues, and they're far behind when it comes to the state of the legal state of the society that we're in. Our constitution is over 60 years old, right? And we're so advanced today. We have promulgated laws in different aspects of society of existence, and our laws are advanced. But I had the opportunity when I worked for the Special Envoy for Syria to actually contribute to the drafting of the constitution of Syria. Now, that was something I really wanted to explore, though I did not end up taking it up professionally after my internship was done. But that is a personal choice. I wanted to be close to my family, so I chose not to. But I know people, people are in terms of people I worked with who genuinely want to contribute their lives working for a big organization where they're actually making a difference they're making a real difference on the field. In a militarily escalated zone, in a country Syria, which faces terrorist activities day in and day out. Lebanon, Beirut had, for instance, the capital of Lebanon, Beirut had an explosion a couple of months back. These countries are always, they need volunteers, people who are hardworking, who've done well in their respective fields. For instance, if you're a good lawyer and you actually want to expand, you actually want to contribute to lawmaking in other countries, you would have that option. So that is something which is definitely worth exploring, because these are extremely, I'm speaking from personal experience, but they're very, very satisfying job descriptions where you know that you're actually very tangibly and materially contributing, and sort of you just sleep better at night knowing that that's something you're doing. So taking that up as a profession and as a career choice would definitely be very rewarding. Coming on to the next side, which is prosecute and defend. Now, this is pretty standard, and you could be in court arguing on behalf of the state. You could be defending, be a defense attorney. Judiciary, again, intuitive. Judges, you could write the judicial exam, and judges are extremely, extremely respected, and it's such an honorable profession, because much like law teaching, I feel judiciary is also very, very actively contributing to making a change, right? For instance, all of these cases that you keep hearing about, cases against criminalization of custodial debts that happen in prison. You could be one of the judges who's actually giving a judgment to better or to uplift a strata of the society, to to punish someone who's committed a crime, punish someone who's actually harmed another person, who's taken away their life. For instance, I mean, there could be various degrees of crimes, but that's the thing, right? You could be the person who's making the change. That is also linked to my third point, which is public interest and legal activism. And this is basically where you could be one of the people who may or may not be affected by a cause, but still be taking it up to the court to ensure that justice is imparted to the section of the society which is not able to fight for itself. There are so many public interest litigation lawyers. I'm sure you've heard the word PIL in common parlance, which is basically someone on their own picks up an issue which is plaguing the society, or is plaguing a part of the society, or an individual, and fights and with a common cause and fights for their rights, for their interests. So that is public interest and legal activism. They are highly respectable people of the society as well. In fact, a lot of judgments, you would see that the last paragraph of the judgment, the court has actually put in a paragraph thanking the public interest litigation lawyer for actually bringing on a cause which is not there at the end of the day to be fighting. Okay, now the next two points, private practice and law firms. So what we'll do is we'll move on to the next slide and discuss the kinds of specializations that you could have, the areas of expertise that you could gain with law school. So you could be doing a 3-year law school degree or a 5-year degree, depending on whether or not you have a bachelor's before that. So a 3-year degree is basically an advanced degree, which you can do if you've covered 3 years of a bachelor's in arts or science or commerce, whatever it is that you want to do. And then there is a 5, so that becomes 3 plus 3 years, which I don't think there are a lot of people who particularly end up doing today, because there is a brilliant option of actually doing a 5-year course, which is an integrated BA LLB course, which in 5 years covers your credits for a degree in arts and a degree in law. There are some colleges which offer science and commerce as well, but most institutions offer BA LLB. Through law school, okay, there are way too many subjects to cover. So what I'm going to do is I have here put forth big picture buckets of the kinds of specializations that you could get. This is, again, by no means an exhaustive list. There are so many other things you could also be doing, which are more nuanced, which are more niche to a particular field. But I'll tell you the big ones. First is your constitutional law. Now, constitution is the grand norm of the country. It is the fundamental document from which everything else flows, all other laws, your entire legal system, your who's going to be the legislature, executive, judiciary, everything flows from constitutional law and from the constitution and the law governing it. Your fundamental rights, fundamental duties, directive principles. I'm sure everyone's heard these terms in 9th or 10th, I'm guessing, and you are aware of what it is that each of these comprise of. And it is violation of these that you as a lawyer are required to protect, to prevent, and if you can't protect or prevent it, then to undo to the extent possible. Next is criminal law. Criminal law is one of those fields where people are really fluent, because it ends up being a reaction to a crime committed, which sort of ignites anger when you end up seeing that someone's been wronged in a bodily way. We keep hearing all of these crimes up. And it's heartbreaking, right? So as a criminal lawyer, you could be defending someone who's accused, but who's not actually committed the crime, but just because of the circumstances seemed like he or she did. At the same time, you could also be a public prosecutor. You could be working with the government to prove the crime that the accused has actually committed, and ensuring that the victim gets justice. That is criminal law. Corporate law, securities and capital markets, these are very commonly practiced by law firms, and most law firms specialize in one or another form of corporate securities and capital markets. So what these laws are they govern the functioning of corporations, how raising of money, ensuring that markets are regulated, that people are not duped. So economic offenses ends up being a part of this, and a little bit a part of this. Economic offenses also end up being a part of litigation, which is around disputes. So yeah, it's sort of a mix of this and disputes. Then there's family law. Family law is what governs your personal existence, right? Like Marriage Act, Divorce Act, Maintenance Act in case of say a divorce, whether the wife needs to be given maintenance because she was dependent on the husband. Till when is she required to be given maintenance? Uh, Marriage laws, what constitutes a valid marriage? Under which personal law? There would be a different applicable laws because ours is a secular country with multiple religions, each of which have their own sets of practices and own sets of rituals, which actually ends up constituting marriage. So laws governing that, laws governing custody in case of separation. So that falls under the purview of family law. You could, again, family law is is much like criminal law also, is very, very passion driven. Then there are other laws like patent law, administration law, taxation law, insurance, international. One more point I'd like to cover here is labor law. We need a lot more labor lawyers in this country than we actually do have, because in the fight against inequality and injustice, very often we forget the poor, very often we forget minimum living conditions and rights and humane treatment of labor. There are umpteen number of acts that come under the purview of labor law, but as a labor lawyer, your primary job would be to ensure that minimum wages are paid to workers. There's again at the ground level in factory there is discrimination at multiple levels. So it is a society within itself. These slightly unregulated sectors, labor laws are very weak, and there's discrimination which these areas these institutions like factories or other such forms of employment organizations deal with, which are absolutely they're painful. There's gender, there's caste, there's so many facets to it. So as a labor lawyer, you would be trying to achieve equality at multiple levels, and that makes you sort of a multi-specialty lawyer in this case. Okay. Now what we are going to do next is I've given all my pros for why you should be a lawyer. I have very I've laid down every aspect that you could be specializing in, what you could be doing after you're done with your degree. Now what the plan is to give you a small test around trying to figure out whether law is actually for you or it isn't. Now it's a very simple test. All you have to do is, if say you're from 9th to 12th, right? So it's the perfect time that it's not too early, it's not too late. Any landmark judgment, old, new, and start reading it. Just start reading it, and along the way, if you see yourself picking a side, if you feel that, okay, with every passing page, I'm feeling more and more as the facts get represented, as the issues get analyzed, as the rules get felt. If you keep feeling more and more drawn towards one side, and towards the end, whatever the judgment is, your concluding paragraph, if you feel happy if it's the side that you chose, or if you feel slightly dejected and angry if it didn't win, then law might be a career for you. Because that's the thing with it. It's easy to be passion driven because you're choosing a cause. And at the end of the day, some people may not agree with me, but I feel that it's not at all times that law is black and white. It's not always that there's right and wrong. So it's very logic driven. It's extremely to each his own. Of course, there are certain basic fundamental principles that cannot be deviated from. I cannot in my head think it's okay to slap somebody and think that, okay, that's acceptable because in my head it's acceptable. I mean, other than that, most definitely, it's logic oriented, it's to each his own. And one side may suit your sensibilities a little more. So if you feel very strongly about it, nothing like it, you're probably cut out for law. But if you don't feel very strongly also, but you're still getting drawn to a particular side, then also it is worth a shot. So what we're going to do is I have listed out some of my favorite cases where the issue was a fight against a larger cause, something which maybe was fought by one person, but was actually the judgment was in the interest of a large part of the population. And we just and if any of these cases appeal to you, just go back, download that judgment. Everything is available online, and read it. Okay, one pointer. Some of these judgments could be 200 pages. Please feel free to drop me an email and I will send you a summarized version to actually be able to get through it in like a few pages. Now let's start with the first two. They're sort of related. The first one is Neelabati Behra versus State of Odisha and D.K. Basu versus State of West Bengal. Now these two cases are cases from 1993 and 1996 respectively. And they were fixated around the form of against forms of torture and abuse that inmates, prison inmates, cell inmates faced in jails by police personnel. Now, what was asked for is different in both of these cases. Without getting too much into what the exact facts were, it was established and it was fought, and then it was established by the court that it is very, number one, atrocities in police custody is an absolute violation of fundamental right to life. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was quoted, and it was said that there are basic human rights, and this protection has to be guaranteed even to someone who's an accused and who's in jail or who's in judicial custody or who's in police custody. And cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment is not acceptable. And it continues to be perpetrated in civilized nations. I'm talking about 93. I'm not talking about a time which is way in the past. So as a civilized society, and I'm sure it still happens today, right? But these two judgments sort of imposed liability on the state. It imposed obligation on the state to ensure that police personnel do not inflict harm or do not inflict atrocities on prison inmates. And guidelines were laid down to this effect to ensure that there would be a code according to which these people are treated. Just because someone is accused of a crime, or just even if someone is convicted of a crime, it does not give police personnel or the law enforcement agency or law and order agency to treat them in inhumane condition, right? I mean, Article 21, which is your right to life, is irrespective of where you are, right? Irrespective of whether you're in jail or not. The next case is Vishaka versus State of Rajasthan. Now, this is a 1997 judgment, cusp of the point in time where women were actually sort of the percentage of women in offices in organizations was increasing with a little more liberal environment for them to become professionals. And it is herein that harassment was on a rise, and there were no guidelines to ensure that at workplace women's integrity and modesty was protected. You had to go through the extreme, the difficult to sort of effectuate route, which was to go file a criminal complaint, again at the behest of the police officer who's going to be taking down your report and under various sections, and then go through your usual forms of interrogation. And it just sort of was not making workplace a conducive place for women to work. Vishaka versus State of Rajasthan was the case which directed the setting up of a committee to ensure that there are guidelines that are put in place to ensure that appropriate action would be would be taken in case there is any such form of harassment that a woman faces, and there would be criminal complaint, and there would be an appropriate authority. There would be a committee to ensure that women are not harassed, and if they are, there is a proper remedial situation to it. So a compliance mechanism was set in place. Life changing, right? Next is just as life changing, in my opinion, which is Aruna Shanbhag, also known as the passive euthanasia or mercy killing case. Now, this is a recent judgment. A lot of you might have heard about it. It was passed in 2018 by the Supreme Court, where a woman who had been harmed had been in a vegetative state, which is basically she was blind, deaf, and paralyzed for 42 years. And in that state, she was kept in the hospital and with no life. Now, the Supreme Court, in its verdict, basically said that you could indulge in passive euthanasia. Now, passive euthanasia is a dignified form of right to die, where you take away, you withdraw medical attention to a terminally ill person who's been in such a state for 42 years. Moving on to the next case. This, in fact, is I think, Bhopal gas tragedy is one of the worst industrial disasters that the world has seen. It will probably be one of the top 5 effects to which are being faced by people to this day. Bhopal gas tragedy was a gas leak in 1984 in Bhopal by from this company which dealt with certain chemicals, and it killed and maimed and caused partial injury and permanent injury with gas release to over 7 lakh citizens. It is said that it resulted in some 6,000 deaths at that point in time, and the state was unable to attribute any responsibility to the company, the company which was actually an Indian subsidiary of a company which was abroad, which wasn't in India. And the problem with that was that we could not attribute liability to that company, which effectively meant that people were not able to get compensated. There was no criminal liability that could be attributed. There was no monetary compensation, no pecuniary compensation that could be given to these people. Still, I think this case was decided quite recently, in fact, where it was said that liability was attributed to the people who were negligent in the night of the disaster, which resulted in the leak. But I mean, delayed justice, but it did still come through. The next case we will discuss is Shah Bano Begum and Daniel Latifi. These are 2 cases, Shah Bano from 1985 and Daniel Latifi, which is actually quite a recent case where, where basically it was around a controversial maintenance suit about a Muslim woman getting maintenance after being separated from her husband. Now, it did end up resulting in a lot of political activism as well. So one aspect of law is that it does impact society at large, because there would be, it's not always necessary that that one community gets uplifted. There could be another community which feels that they are being wronged because there is interference, right? So as a lawyer, you would be mindful to these aspects as well. You cannot simply formulate laws because you think it's logical. You have to be mindful of the civil society, of different parts of the society. So there's a lot of cognitive intuition that goes into it to ensure that laws promulgated actually speak to all parts of the society. And if it cannot speak to all parts of the society, it definitely does not offend the sensibilities of one which is not wrong, of course. I mean, a murderer cannot say that they're a conglomerate of people whose feelings need to be kept in mind, but a community otherwise. Right? Again, while we're at community, would be the next case, which is Indira Sahni, which is also a 1992 judgment, wherein the Supreme Court sort of dealt in depth with the artificial inequality in the name of casteism, which has been set in place, and how atrocities are committed against this particular section of the society, and the implications thereof, the consequences, how it percolates down, and everything that's happening today, for instance, the Hathras incident. None of these things are, you can look at them in isolation, right? All of these aspects are to be looked at holistically from a societal perspective. So Indira Sahni also dealt with injustice at such a large level. Now, the last point is a judgment from yesterday, actually, where the Supreme Court ruled that a woman, the reason I've included this case, it's not a landmark case, but it definitely is something very recent in case you want to just open a newspaper and read up about it. The Supreme Court yesterday said that women who are estranged from men still have a right to be able to live in the husband's family home. Good or bad, make that choice for yourself, right? Just go back and read it. Now, the whole point of this exercise, which I really hope hasn't made half of you go off to sleep, is that if any of these, if even one of them speaks to you, personal level, you've heard a friend, you've heard your parents, you've heard a good speech, you've heard a political leader, you've read a good book. If anything speaks to you, please just open up the case, or a good summary. In fact, you don't even need to look at a summary. Just go back, read up a good summary of a case, and see if you feel drawn towards one side. If in your head, before you reach the conclusion, you're actually making arguments to yourself around why you think side A is correct and side B isn't, why the petitioner is right and the applicant is not. So it's quite a helpful test, and I think if you can, even if it doesn't help you choose it, if it's not for you, at least you can eliminate it and move on to another aspect that you might want to discover, or another profession that you might want to look into. Right. I think the next small bit I would speak about is my experience in law school, and having covered these different forms of laws and different forms of, I discovered quite a few forms of, I did quite a few internships. I did, of course, as a part of my curriculum, some were mandatory, some I took on by myself to sort of figure out what it is that I want to do and where it is that I want to be. And I realized that law school as an experience itself is a brilliant experience, and it holds true irrespective of the law school that you end up going to. I was fortunate enough to make it to the Premier Institute, but most of my friends, most of the colleagues, everyone that I speak to, it seems that the experience of law school in itself is beautiful. People from different specializations, everyone has one thing to say, that it grooms you to inculcate qualities which make for a very, very upright individual, somebody who is not scared to voice their opinions, someone who's courageous to actually speak for what they think is right, think and logically think, because that's the point. If you're studying 5 years of law, you're definitely also going to study about why that law was put in place. We don't just sit with our bare axe open reading sections, right? We need the legislative intent behind each law. Why is it? What was the problem that was being remedied by a particular act being implemented, being enforced, being notified? Now that's what it ends up doing is that it gives you the cognitive ability to be able to think in a logical manner and put forth your arguments. And it sort of drives you from within to support a cause. I mean, it does for me, and it does for a lot of other people. And if you're lucky, it will do for you as well. And one thing about passion, I'd like to say, this is, I really don't want to I don't have a mantra to tell you about how to discover what your passion is. I really don't. I can tell you how you can for the law, but I can't tell you otherwise. But there is one thing which the end result, and you can sort of connect the dots backwards. is to see where you want to be. And by where you want to be, for instance, for me, I have bad days too. Law as a profession is extremely challenging because it can be very strenuous. There are days, there are weeks where I'm working for 18 hours a day and I'm on no sleep and I'm like perpetually on conference calls or working on a draft, eyes are red. Definitely, that is a downside to a very book-oriented profession. But I would, even on those bad days, there is nothing else I'd rather be doing. There is no other profession I could think myself fitting better into. So if 300 out of 365 days you love the job you're going, the field that you want to get into, and 65 out of 365 days you can still be sure that there's nothing else you'd rather be doing, I think you're good to go. That is where I think you can be sure that you're sort of passionate about it. Okay, I'm going to unshare my. Okay, now I have 5 to 10 minutes. I hope I haven't overshot my time. I'll literally take 5 to 10 more minutes to just cover a few points which I think are extremely important because they sort of plagued me when I was younger. When I was your age, I was definitely dealing with a lot of stress, despite knowing. I mean, I know it's easy to say that. I knew from 8th grade that I wanted to be a lawyer, but at the end of the day, it's time to make the choice. You're stressed, you're anxious about the unknown, the fear of what's uncertain, right? So one very important aspect that you need to take with you on this journey, especially before you've actually made that choice, before you give that one examination, which is the CLAT or the exam for CS or the exam for Chartered Accountancy or the exam for IIT or MBA or whatever, MBBS, whatever it is that you're going to be giving. Till that stage, one important, one accomplice, one aid that you need to have with you is self-worth. I cannot stress enough on how important it is because you will have bad days. Everyone has bad days. We all wake up to feeling sometimes that don't know what's going to happen. Will I be able to crack through? I did not do as well as I would have liked to have done in my last test. There are so many things that could bring your morale down. But self-worth has always been something which I know everybody I know has dealt with in one form or another. Even the most successful of people have bad days. I do too. I mean, I do too. Everyone has does. Everybody. And that being said, it's very important to know that you have to keep telling yourself 3 words at such times, which is knowing you can. You have to say that you know you can. And these knowing you can as a sentence, as individual words are extremely powerful because knowing it's a state of mind. It's knowledge, right? It's in your control. Can is again an enabler. It's an enabling tool. You tell yourself that you're capable. You can do it. And you, of course, is the center. You can do it. So when you keep saying these things to yourself, it ends up becoming, I know these things sound very textbook, but try implementing it. It's harder at first. You'll have to tell yourself consciously that, okay, don't do it. It's like telling yourself to not bite your nails, right? You have to tell yourself the first 15 days that, okay, I have to not chew my nails. The 16th day, you'd probably just not do it subconsciously. Similarly, every time you're feeling low, you have to, if you deal with self-worth issues, you definitely have to tell yourself that, you know what, I'm feeling low today, but I will wake up tomorrow. It's going to be a new day. There will be a new exam. There will be a new hurdle that I have to deal with. And I will come out strong and I will deal with it head on. And that is, and only you can say that to yourself. Only you. So never ever forget the importance of self-worth on this journey because you're the only person who's going to be with you through thick and thin, right? I'm definitely not saying that it's going to be easy, but I'm saying it's simple, which brings me to the second Gyan point that I would like to say to you all, which is 100% plagiarized from Chairman Sir, but I have applied it all my life, so I sort of claim a little bit of usage rights over it, which is that choice is yours. It is always, always yours. The sooner you learn it, the better it would be. I'm not talking about unattainable, not feasible choices. For instance, I say today, I choose to be the Solicitor General of India. That's not how it works. There are milestones. You have to break it down to get to where you want to be. But those milestones or those little stepping stones or those little blocks that you chop your larger picture goal into, they're all attainable if you make the right choices at each point in time. Now, what is the right choice? Right choice is almost always intuitive. It's almost always intuitive. November, PS5 is coming out to the markets, right? December, you have an exam. What do? That's the choice you make. Criminal law, for instance, you want to be a criminal lawyer. Now, what choice? You can make a choice. Either you can study the night before the criminal law examination, the final examination of criminal law, or you could be out partying. You make that choice, right? So the choice is almost always yours. Now, the third point I want to talk about is sort of not really related to the first 2 points, but it's my favorite cheat sheet to knowing things, which is asking for help. I cannot stress enough on how important it is to ask for help. Seek help. You're all young, intelligent minds studying in a brilliant institution. You're guided at all times by teachers who are so dedicated and so committed to the idea of holistic education. I have been to over 10 schools in different parts of this country. I have studied abroad as well. And I promise you, while what you may think, you may or may not agree with me at this point in time, when you look back, and I speak from experience, so I didn't have to look back to be able to assess. I knew this even when I was in school. But take it from me, there are much, much bigger problems that students your age face in other schools, primarily because teachers are not as involved. Am I going to name these people? Of course not. These schools? No, I'm not. But that's not the important point. My point is 10 different schools, and I have not seen an institution where teaching meets parenting this beautifully. It is so organic. It's so harmonious. It is absolutely holistic. And even at your age, when there were times that, of course, as a teenager, I also probably felt rebellious about it. I felt, oh no, why are my parents interfering? Why are my teachers interfering? But at the end of the day, the important thing is that even back then, I always felt protected. I knew that I could seek help when I wanted to, because somebody or the other would always be there. In fact, in my case, almost everyone was there for me. But if you do not have a bond yet with one particular teacher, there must be one person, one teacher, counselor, chairman sir, Shilpi ma'am, principal sir, so many teachers who are absolutely committed to the idea of growth for you, and ask for help. Make that bond. Put yourself out there. It's that vulnerability which will help you really tap on the potential that you all have. Because I've been working for 4 years, and I promise you, no question is a stupid question. If a first-year associate today who's graduated right out of law school asks me, what are shares? I will not think it is a stupid question. Similarly, if you asked Jayanti ma'am, can you please explain what is the definition of macroeconomics? After 1 month, she may be angry at you, but she will not say it's a stupid question, because there are no stupid questions. You're entitled to the questions you have, and nobody can answer them for you if you don't ask. So ask for help. And now what I'm going to do is, because I have very bad PPT skills, but I still managed to make a slide on this. I will share it anyway, because it's colorful. On the cheat sheet to what I think is the cheat sheet to success, and why I call it the cheat sheet to success, and success is a quote unquote, is because success is of course individualistic. It is very, very you oriented. It's all about what I think would make me successful. Because for me, for instance, I will not feel half as successful if my parents are not happy with what I'm doing in my life. Or if I do not speak to my sister at least once in 3 days to figure out what she's doing with her life and if everything is fine. I won't feel successful, irrespective of what professional heights I attain. So everything. So there I have again, there's a choice I'm making there also to ensure that I can give time to my family, to ensure that I'm respecting elders, to ensure that I'm also studying or working really hard to be where I want to be. If I want to pick a pro bono work, for instance, like Chairman Sir said, actually that is a very, very important aspect to law as well. And it is also applicable to your life. Without getting into law, it's very applicable to your life as well. You can always find a little bit of time if you make that choice to help someone. For instance, I sort of mentor a child each year from 9th or 10th grade from an underprivileged society, from a slum in Bombay, around her academic pursuits. So you can always find a way to give back if you're making the right choices. And at your stage, I would say that along with choice, it is very important to have faith in yourself, to know that you can, and mind over matter, tell yourself that you can make choices in furtherance thereto. And if you're stuck, please ask for help. And yes, thank you so much for being extremely patient with me. Thank you so much, Chairman Sir, Shilpi Ma'am, Principal Sir, Madhusmita Ma'am, for this beautiful opportunity. And I really hope I could inspire at least a few whoever's up and awake. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Shivangi, Sonali, thank you so much. Yeah, definitely you have inspired many of the seniors, and thank you for explaining how to prepare for CLAT and the different aspects of law, and how to make a choice and have passion and all that. Definitely, it was very encouraging, and the seniors must have got a lot of inputs from this session. Now I think we'll start the question and answer session. Let's see.
Smita,
Yes, sir.
before you speak, let me come here.
Yes, sir.
Personally, you are amazing. Actually, you now when you support now, certainly you will win the case. Yes, so articulate and put forth your point in a very, very discreet manner. And now I see how you matured yourself to be what you aspire to be. That's what I wanted to see in my seniors, and I'm so proud, Sonali, seeing you fulfilling your parents' dreams. I particularly remember your father, how concerned he used to be, how concerns he used to be. Almost, more often your mother used to come to the school almost every week without your knowledge, of course, to find out, what's going on and how are you progressing, meet all the teachers, because you won't feel good if, she comes and checks every week. But that's how parents are, and that's how the teachers are, and that grooms and see what the school teachers, your parents, and the institutions have done to you. So thank you, and all the best, Sonali. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. So we'll take up questions one by one. So to start with, we have Orissa Patnaik. Orissa, just I'm unmuting you.
Hello. Yes, thank you, ma'am. And thank you, Didi. I think you answered quite a lot of questions that I did have about law. One specific question that I had that I don't think I can get from any kind of professional or anything is what I actually need to survive in law school. I mean, getting in is one thing, preparing for CLAT is one thing, but then I've always kind of been puzzled about what I need to do to, stay at the top of my game. So if you could help with that.
Sure. That's actually a very good question. It deals with getting through law school, which is actually it's a difficult course, no doubt. It involves a lot of studying, but you know I think my thumb rule to making through law school successfully was to ensure that I somehow managed to efficiently manage my time. Now that is something which is, for instance, an examination which you know is going to be extremely lengthy. What do? You prioritize, you manage, right? This principle sort of applies to law school as well, because if you start studying every law, it will never end. There are way too many commentaries, there are way too many judgments that you will never be able to finish. But then it becomes important to be able to time manage, plus be able to prioritize, which you can very successfully do with the help of seniors, because they would have sort of just done, say, someone who's a bad senior to you would be in a good position to tell you what exactly it is that, you know, is very important, because that would be the main constituent of a particular course or of a particular practice area or of a particular specialization. So that being said, I think it is management around these. Hard work, of course. I think hard work is one thing which is not, you cannot substitute it for anything else. But working smart sort of becomes, which may be a choice in other professions to excel, sort of becomes one of the most, becomes crucial when it comes to law school, because it's just a lot to do, a lot to process, and you just need to be able to juggle quite a few things efficiently to just get through it successfully. I really hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I think there's some problem in a connection. Yeah. Okay, we'll move to the next question. We have Saloni Padi. Saloni, can you turn on your video, please? Yeah, I'm just unmuting you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Hello, Dee. It's really nice to hear from you. You got a really in-depth look at what law exactly is. So my question was, in CLAT, it's obvious that a lot of people will score the exact same marks because it's about 70,000 people giving the exam. So how do you stay at the top of the line with like same people having the same marks? You could be at the top or at the bottom. So how do you stay at the top?
How do you stay at the top? If you have the same marks in CLAT, okay, now that is actually governed by the exam itself. So there are certain rules. I think the number one is the person who's older will get a higher rank. Then there are a few other criteria like that. I actually don't remember. It's been dinosaur years since I gave CLAT, but there are a few criteria which are actually sadly not in your hands to deal with. They are sort of they deal with like your age and few other things like that. So and your choice of institute. So I would say that actually this is a very good point. When you're filling your CLAT form, be very, very, very mindful of the institute that the ranking that you give to each institute. If you want to give NALSAR, which is Hyderabad, before NUJS, which is in Calcutta, if you want to do the other way around. So what you do is that you make that conscious choice prior, be very sure of what you're filling in, because once you fill in the form, you'll have no option. So if someone has given NALSAR is rank 2, college rank 2 and college rank 3. If you've actually switched it and someone else has given 2 before you, then that person would get priority, right? Because they opted for the institute with the higher ranking. So be very sure that you fill out your form properly. But other than that, I don't think it would be in your hands to particularly be able to ensure that if rank 54 and 55 have the same mark, who gets 54. The best way to deal with that is to just ensure that you're ranked 53, right?
Yeah. Okay. Now let's take up a question by Mohammed. Mohammed Ishraf. Can you please turn on your video? Mohammed?
Good afternoon, everyone. So Heidi, first of all, I would like to thank you because before you, a lot of alumni talks took place, but those were related to robotics, IIT, and all. And I was just a spectator, but I was so interested since yesterday that you are there and you are talking about law. Law is something which gives me a kick. Like I just have two general questions. First, which are the subjects we need to focus more for cracking CLAT? For cracking CLAT, for which are the subjects we need to focus more?
I'll very honestly, I don't think at this stage it will be prudent to prioritize a subject over the other. Most definitely, some carry greater marks, so it will be much. I mean, it's smarter to sort of be focusing a little bit more on that. But I remember, so when I gave CLAT, only 20 out of 200 marks was for maths, and what ended up happening was that the people who actually got through to NLS Bangalore were the kids who got 20 on 20 in maths. And the ones who had thought that it's okay, we're going to attempt 180 marks and not care about the 20 marks and give 4 out of 5 subjects are all, were people who could not actually get higher marks. So it's very important. I mean, why I'm saying this is because a lot of people use that as a strategy that we will completely care very little about a section which carries low marks. Please don't do that. You can of course put in more effort in current affairs and legal analysis, which I think is also easier to crack because they are logic oriented. Okay, not current affairs. Current affairs you can be up to date by reading newspapers. You can be up to date by reading. I think Universal is the book that most people refer to for general knowledge. But most definitely for legal analysis, even if you're not doing coaching, you firstly should definitely go through the kinds of problems that have come in past year papers and familiarize yourself so that when you're in the exam, I'm sure everyone's giving a lot of mock tests. But familiarize yourself with the concept because with the pattern of legal affairs, because they keep changing it each year. I'm sure you'll notice that it's different from 3 years back. It's completely different, then it's a little different the year after. And being aware of what all could be the forms of questions definitely sort of puts you in the front seat. Other than that, my opinion would be to go for legal analysis and current affairs with all your heart, because they're also the ones that you really need to master. For instance, logical reasoning, English, maths, they're more, you can still figure it out, but these two require prior education. So do spend some time on it, but again, please do not ignore any part of the question paper, because that is what would determine which college you end up going to. I have no doubt after studying inside that I'm sure everyone will make it to a law school, but if you want to get the best, if you really want to maximize your potential, the idea is to not skip a section.
Yeah, that's true. Very, very true, Sonali. We'll be taking up the next question. We have Satakshi. Satakshi, if you can.
I think Mohammed has another question.
Mohammed, where's Mohammed? Well, we'll take up his question after we take up the other questions. We'll come back to him. Next, I think Dinesh Sahu. Dinesh Sahu, if you can turn on your video, please. Yeah, just a minute.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hi.
Hi, Dee. Yeah. So first of all, I want to thank you that you answered a lot of questions of mine in your tellings, and but still I want to know that as per you told that there is not something great about the law. So what are the most important attributes to be a successful lawyer today? Yeah.
I'm actually quite glad you've asked me this question, because I'm definitely trying to inculcate. I wake up every day hoping that I can be like a little better than the lawyer I was the previous day. And the most important, I think, factor to acing or to being a good lawyer is to, firstly, you have to be very, very, very well aware of your circle, of your surroundings. I think what sets apart a good lawyer and a great lawyer is, I have seen great lawyers argue in courts. I have heard them, Harish Salve, Gopal Subramaniam, Mohan Parasar, and lawyers like these, lawyers of this stature. The difference is that they know a little about everything. And I'm not saying it's not in a jack of all trades sort of a way, but what I mean to say is that you should definitely be aware of what is happening around you, so that because law is never standalone. I cannot say that, okay, something is applicable to me in criminal law, under criminal law, but it has no facets under any other law. Every law has a bearing on other forms of law as well, on existence of mankind, right? So the whole idea is to ensure that you know a little bit about, for instance, if I promulgate a law today, which, or help promulgate a law today, which is great for one section of the society, but sort of is upsetting to another because I wasn't aware of that aspect to it. Now that is what makes me a bad lawyer, right? Because I'm not taking into account society at large. I'm being very myopic with my vision and just looking at one aspect there too. So holistic understanding of the society, of the societal conditions, economic, political, and social, is very, very important is a very important distinguishing factor between what makes a good and a great lawyer. Another thing which I think, I mean, is sort of, it requires you to put in, again, a lot of effort, is to read. Definitely reading is very important. You know, by reading, I don't mean pick up a 500-page book and just sit down and become a bookworm. But you definitely need to hear other arguments and other perspectives and other points of view. So that also contributes to a non-myopic vision of the society and of law. Because, for instance, why I said pick a side when I spoke about picking up a judgment reading is because one side may appeal to you more, and it may something else might appeal to Saloni, something else might appeal to Muhammad. So, which is again not black and white law, but things which are gray, right? So you have to be aware of different points of view, and that can only come with reading. You can read blogs, you can read other forms of all these pages where people discuss why it is that they think a law is good or bad, or how it impacts the society in a good way or in a bad way. So I think this holistic understanding is what would make someone a very good lawyer.
Yeah. So I have another question also. So as per you told that the laws has the capability of changing the world, and the law helps the society to be evolved. So according to me, why only the laws need to be changed and evolved?
So why I think evolution of law is very, very important is because at the end of the day, today, your mom tells you that, okay, you can only eat dessert one day a week, right? Now that is something that she's telling you to be enforced. Now, unless that is in place, you can eat it all days a week, right? You could be doing that. Similarly, if there's no framework in place which guides you or which sets defined boundaries around what it is that is acceptable and what is not acceptable, because it hinders someone else's right to life or someone else's personal space or someone else's right to property. Anyone will do anything. So that is the basic principle around why law is important. Now, why it needs to evolve and why it is very important in a changing society is because points of view. Everyone has a different point of view. So unless something standard is put in place, something which governs everyone, people may choose to not implement it. I may choose to implement it one way, you may choose to implement it another way. And there would be chaos in the society. There would be no law and order. And what would the police enforce? What would the judges, what would they impart as justice if there is no framework which is governing what is right, what is wrong, and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable? So that is why evolution of law becomes very important for changing society with each passing day.
Thank you so much, Dee. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sonali. You have been so elaborative, and that's why the children are saying that you have answered most of their questions, giving details of everything. Yeah. Yeah, next we'll be taking up a question by Sania Majumdar. Yeah, Sania, your video on, please.
Hello, ma'am. This is Sanya from the residential school. Well, I wanted to ask you a really silly question, but that has been pondering in my mind for quite some time. That people traditionally perceived law to be a very risky and quite a lengthy career in the society, whereas people also perceived law to be a career which people from arts background only can pursue. So, what are your take in these two statements?
Firstly, there are three things I want to answer to. There are no questions that are silly questions. Every question is a good question because it is helping you know something more. Firstly, law definitely traditionally has been known to be a risky career, but I will, with the evolution of law, with our society advancing to with each stage to a different stage, to a higher stage, there are different forms of law that you could pursue, which I sort of briefed today on the areas of expertise, not all of which are risky. I agree it is, even when I was studying law, my parents always told me that, if you become a criminal lawyer, it's so risky, you'd be at court and dealing with criminals and murderers and rapists. And, that is, they're very valid when they say that. It can be a risky profession, but it also depends on what practice area you end up choosing. So if a high on risk life is not something which you feel is for you, you can go for something else, which again is within the purview of law, which helps you define other aspects of life. For instance, you can choose corporate law. You can work as a part of a law firm. You can do patent law. You can do insurance, banking, tax laws, where you pay taxation on your income and you pay other indirect taxes like goods and service taxes. So you could be contributing to other modalities of law as a profession, and not necessarily catering to something which is risky in a sense that you're dealing with people who are not the best individuals of the society, or who have indulged in criminal acts, right? So that's the beauty of the law. There is one law governing every aspect of existence. You will never ever run out of options to choose from. About it being lengthy, it is lengthy. Actually, traditionally used to be lengthy if you first decide to do 3+3 of courses, then you decide to also be practicing in courts. There are other ways. So if there are other methods now to sort of shorten the learning and quickly start your work experience oriented life, which is to basically first study in a law school which has a 5-year degree, and then do internships so that you can get a job after, and then you can work in a job, get some experience. At the same time, then you can also explore other options and you can get into academia. So basically, there are ways to reduce the number of years you put in. It's not necessary that you have to take 20 years to establish your court practice. You could work with a very good lawyer because you've studied from a very good institution and you've put in the effort, and you can just, instead of what might take someone 20 years, might take you 5 years because you're just that hardworking at it. So there are always, that's true for all professions. You can make a learning curve as long and as short as. I think I hope that answers your question.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sonali. We next student we have is Siddhant Patnaik. Siddhant Patnaik, video on, please. Yeah. Just a minute. Sorry. Yeah,
Hello. Good afternoon.
Hi. Good afternoon.
So I would basically like to ask a question. As we have seen that basically law, since childhood we have been seeing judiciary, courts, arguments, all that, judges and all. So is that atmosphere any different from the atmosphere that you get in a law firm?
Right. It's actually very, very different. I would actually like to stress on one point. Trust me, the courts that you see in WLIT are not true representatives of how all courts function. I mean, lower courts, maybe maybe the setup is similar, but the life in a court is Bollywood is not the best representation of how courts are. That being said, life in a court itself is quite different from life in a law firm, for sure, because life in law firms are slightly more corporate organization oriented. It functions on those principles. There is you have a desk, you sit and you draft agreements depending on what kind of law practice area you're pursuing. But if it is the atmosphere you're talking about, most definitely it's different, because courts are more, I mean, it's sort of a public institution, right? It's a government sort of a feel, it has a government sort of a feel to it. Whereas most corporate law firms are more, or even litigation law firms. Law firms in general have a more corporate entity institution feeling to them. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you,
So,
Sonali.
well, basically, what I've noted is, I just wanted to say one thing.
Yeah, tell. Go
Please
ahead.
go ahead.
I thought that the scope of law was just limited to court and judges and all that, but after listening to your words, I now know that there's a lot to law. It's not just the courts and all, but there's so much to it. So the scope is just vast, isn't it?
Absolutely. That was the whole point of this presentation. Actually, I was very undecided on what to speak to you all about, but then I realized that I should actually tell everyone that there is so much to law that you don't end up seeing in movies, because it's just not movie material, but that you can contribute in so many different ways. You never run out. And the best thing is that you could love 3, 4, 5 different practice areas. I do capital markets, but I still know a lot about criminal law. I still know a lot about insurance law, because they just interest me. And I can, if today I decide to write a paper on it, or to take a lecture on it, I really can. So you just never run out of things to do. That's the beauty of the law.
Thank you so much.
Siddhant, yeah. Thank you. Our next question is from Sambit.
Yes.
Yeah, Sambit, video on, please.
Ma'am, as ma'am said, you have already cleared major doubts of mine. I want to ask a small question, that how to manage my time for CLAT preparation with all these studies.
Are you in 12th standard or 11th?
No, 11th. 11th.
You're in 11th. Okay. So then you started well in time. And one thing I'd like to tell you is this 80-20 theory I have, which is that I knew from 8th standard that I wanted to write CLAT. And I studied for it probably 20% in 11th grade and 80% in 12th grade. So everyone who's still in 11th, even in 12th for that matter, there is time. Please, I would recommend not taking a drop year to write a competitive exam ever. So you need to actually be very, very mindful of how you divide your time and how you study for both and you study for a competitive exam. I would like to take a minute here and say that please do not prioritize your board exam. A lot of people end up doing that, and it's not a very wise decision, primarily because the thing with competitive exams is that it's not about how well you do, but it also depends on how well the other person is doing, right? It's ranking oriented. So it's not a very wise decision to completely think that it's okay, I know I'm going to write CLAT, or I know I'm going to do IIT, so it doesn't matter how many marks I'm getting. Marks are just as important, which is why what I did was to ensure that every day I was dedicating at least a few hours to my board exams and a few hours to CLAT preparation. Now, CLAT preparation, so the idea is to ensure that if on one day you're making yourself CBSE heavy, if your time schedule is CBSE heavy, then do a little bit of CLAT, but then don't completely ignore it. Similarly, on the next day, if you decide that you want to give 3 hours to finishing this one concept under legal analysis for CLAT, then ensure that you're doing like a small chapter in, say, macroeconomics or microeconomics, that or one aspect of one chapter of one subject, which takes 1 hour or 2 hours. So the idea is to always end up balancing out. And I always say studying is literally like dieting. You cannot think that I will crash diet for 15 days and then I will eat for 6 months. You cannot do that. You have to balance it out to be where you need to be in 6 months. your goal in 6 months is to fit into that lehenga for a wedding, or if your goal in 6 months is to get good marks in both CLAT and in your board exam, then the idea is to tread each day one at a time and ensure that you're meeting daily targets and studying to the effect that you're as a whole you're able to give equal time to both.
I think his connection is not stable. We'll move on to the next student, Sahil Agarwal. Sahil, are you there?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, go ahead.
Actually, my question to you is, I'm a science student and I want to pursue law as my career. So I'm thinking that I'll face difficulty because I'm a science student. So what do you think, what sort of problems can I have while getting law as my career or studying CLAT?
So actually, I'm glad you asked this question. I had wanted to address it, but it sort of slipped my mind. It is, I promise you, you will face no difficulty being a science student preparing for CLAT, none whatsoever. The only difference is that maybe you might, I know for a fact that science is a little time intensive, or so I hear from my friends who did science in comparison to people who do commerce. Commerce is hard enough, but science is just slightly time intensive. You just need to be mindful about the way you manage your time. But other than that, there is absolutely no bearing of what you study in science or in commerce or in arts that could particularly impact your studies for CLAT or your profession in law as a career. I went to, in my law school, there were so many people who had done science in 11th and 12th grade, and they were there studying with me, with having managed time, having given their boards and given CLAT in the same year. So it does not, you just very honestly need to be slightly mindful of how you allocate your time. If you're feeling extremely exhausted after, say, biology on a particular day or chemistry on a particular day, then pick on something slightly easy. Don't do math on the same day for CLAT. Then you pick on something like English or if you were doing something easier for your science study one day, then you just pick on something harder for CLAT that day, for instance, legal analysis. So you just sort of learn how to divide and prioritize for each day. Again, the best way to actually be able to do both things at the same time is to ensure that you are dividing it and meeting targets for each day. So just set yourself realistic targets and there will be no issue, I promise you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, actually, I have another doubt.
Sure.
Ma'am, what about 3 years of 5 years of completing my course in CLAT, means like NLU? What will I do after that 5 years or 3 years program? It's like, I know that we will be getting jobs and we'll be doing internship. I means many of them do integrated internship, or they must be doing after 5 years. But what exactly will do after 5 years or 3 years?
Okay, so as college starts, you will start studying courses and you will start identifying with a few subjects with the passage of time, right? For instance, by the end of second year, once you're done with the criminal law courses, some people will decide that, okay, I want to be a criminal lawyer. By the time your contract law course is done in third year, then you might decide you want to pick up private practice. By fourth year, you might choose insurance. So as with each passing day, as time progresses, you will end up consciously and subconsciously choosing the field that you're becoming good at, or you're beginning to appreciate, like the field of law that really speaks to you. So through third to fifth year, for most law schools, it is compulsory that you have one internship for 1 month at least. So you end up making choices around that and applying to places which, for instance, if I want to be a corporate lawyer, then I will apply to a corporate law firm. If I want to practice law in a lower court in my hometown, then I apply to an internship with a lawyer there or with a counsel there, or I can apply to being a judge's clerk. So you make internship and course choices along the way through law school to be able to particularly mold yourself into moving in one direction and by the time, whether or not you'll get a job really depends on whether or not you want the job. So if you do want a law firm job, then you'll probably sit for campus placements, or you will work in a law firm and intern in a law firm and hope that they offer you the job. Otherwise, you can be working with a lawyer as an intern. You could be interning with a lawyer and hope that he gives you an offer if you want to practice law in a court afterwards. So these are all choices that are made along the way. So what you want to do would be, some people want to study further. They apply in their final year of law school, they end up applying for LLM. LLM is the Masters in Law for, you could apply to Indian universities, you could apply to foreign universities, and gain specialization, 1 year specialization in the field that you want to do something in next. People who want to become professors can get into research and work with, for instance, our NLS itself offers a lot of research positions. So you can just get into those research positions, research for a few years, and then become a teacher. So you will keep getting opportunities along the way. There would be people to guide you. If not the professors, there'd be friends and seniors, and of course, alumni from school. Like, you can always reach out. But it'll be best that when the time comes and you have to walk the walk, that is when you approach someone with what it is, how it is that you tread that path.
Thank you for clearing my doubts.
Thank you. Sonali, we have Mohammed, I think, got disconnected that time. Mohammed, you can turn on your video so that I can unmute you.
I another doubt. Keeping all objectives apart, like everyone would say, I would opt for law for serving people, for carrying on my passion. But I have a practical question, like if someone wants a stable and fixed salaried job, then he may opt for OJS, Odisha Judicial Service. But if anyone wants to really wants to grow and make a great money, then what should he opt for after his law course? I mean, in BLLB and BLLM.
Right. So your question is, what is highest remunerating as a law professional, right? So
Yeah.
very honestly, it is, there are way too many streams. Law as a profession usually is quite high paid. Working in a law firm, if you work in a tier 1 law firm, one of the top, so there are 6 tier 1 law firms in the country. If you work for one of them, you could be making quite a bit of money which is much higher than people who graduate with you, because other professional fields just pay a little lower. Not all, of course, but like some of them. So it is definitely the top paid any which way if you work with a law firm. If you work with a counsel, in a few years of practice, once you've established a client base, and if you are working in a court and you have a chamber, then you can earn really, really well. Criminal and civil litigation lawyers earn very, very well as well. Law firm seniors earn very well. These would be amongst your international organizations, pay very well also. So these would be your extremely well-paying legal professionals, well-paid legal professionals. Others also may not be paying large sums of money, but they are also well remunerated, because as a judge, you get so much respect. You get the privileges of being a public servant, right? That's the whole beauty of working for or serving a public serving the state, which is that you get perks and privileges. So it may not give you money in absolute terms, it may not hit your bank account, but you get so much manpower and privileges and respect. So I mean, that's a choice you make. If money is a driving factor, then definitely law firm and counsel practice would be very well paying. But all said and done, if you put in effort, if you work hard and you're a lawyer, you will end up doing well and earning well any which way eventually, if not too long.
So for doing all this thing, is it necessary to go outside? Like, can't we do here where we live, Odisha?
No, actually, you definitely can. For instance, NLU NLU in Cuttack is a good institute. I have a few friends who studied with me, my batch who studied from there, who I work with in Bombay, and they're doing very well for themselves. You can definitely, but see, it also forms part of the NLS consortium, right? So the Law University Consortium. So you have to actually hit the exact mark to be able to get a seat in NLU Orissa because it's ranking wise. There are other law institutes also. I think Kalinga and Utkal University also have good law courses. But very honestly, if you have the opportunity and you write the CLAT and you get through to another to an institute in another city, do definitely consider it, because it is a very different experience to be living on campus living on campus with 500, 800, 1000 other lawyers or lawyers to be. It's a different experience because you hear a lot. One way to cut down on, I think I just advise someone to read a lot for a holistic view on law. You can cut down on a lot of reading if you just speak to other people who have legal opinions, right? So an on-campus experience is incomparable. It is not something which staying at home in Orissa will particularly give to you, and on-campus law colleges are usually the ones that are NLU. For instance, I think if you study in Kalinga, I don't think they have a hostel. And also, if you're in Odisha, why would you stay in a hostel? So definitely consider it. Of course, if you want to still go ahead and stay in Odisha, that's by all means your choice. But it's worth a consideration.
Thank you. It was
Yeah.
really inspiring talking to you and all.
I'm glad.
Yeah, that's all thanks to Chairman Sir, for organizing such sessions. Then we take up Abhishek Gupta's question. Abhishek Gupta, if you're there. Yeah. Abhishek, if you can turn on your video.
My question is that what are the law courses after available for a become student?
Sorry, Abhishek, can you please repeat yourself? I think.
I am Abhishek Gupta from class 11th Commerce. My question is, what are the law courses available for a become student?
Law courses available for BCom student. Okay, so for someone who's already enrolled into BCom or someone who's in first grade but wants to do BCom? Okay, I'll answer both ways. So basically, if you want to do commerce and you don't want to pick up arts as the other degree in with law, you do have options, because there are some universities that offer a BCom LLB course as well, where I think you can do commerce subjects with law rather than doing art subjects and law. But that is very, very institution specific. It may not be available in a lot of institutes. So you would have to be mindful of the universities you apply to. CLAT may not be the best option for you. Then there are a few colleges in Pune, I think Symbiosis and Institute of Legal Studies in Pune offer BCom LLB as well, BBA LLB, BCom LLB, and PSC LLB. I think they have all of those options. So you might want to do a little bit of research around that and figure out if what colleges offer these two degrees together.
Yeah, Sonali, we have Jayanti ma'am who wants to talk to you. Jayanti ma'am, I'm just unmuting you. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Sonali, so nice to hear.
Hello, ma'am.
It's lovely listening.
Thank you, ma'am. So nice to see you.
God bless you, and you achieve all that you deserve. And I can't believe my children have become so big, so matured, and like I can't express in words how I'm feeling. Okay, my point is to you is that see, in India the law, the system, the justice is given very, like you say, justice delayed is justice denied, right? So as you are young generation, you people, I want, how you have a plan for making like justice done very quickly in some policy change? Have you planned something? I want to know, because you have to do something for India in this respect. So do you have any plan for that?
Thank you, ma'am, for your question. It's also very good to see you today. To answer your question, so there are changes that are being put into place now. For instance, there are fast-track courts that are being set up. A lot of courts are now sitting through summers also and trying to, like, reduce the case files that have developed over the years. And it's of course a painful state of affairs. It is said that there is one judge for every 3 lakh people in this country in the higher courts, and I think 17,000 in the lower courts. So it's a very bad number, because I mean crime rate in India is definitely not reducing, and so there is the number of cases are only piling up. But policy change, I don't think there is anything in place right now for policy changes. But there have been a few suggestions and recommendations by committees on how to fast track the cases that are already pending, by setting up courts, by making courts work overtime, appointing additional judges. I think they keep having these examinations and recruitment for lower judiciary especially. That happens quite often, and they've increased the number of times in the year that there is that exam. I'm not 100% certain around that, but I mean, I think implementationally there are some changes that are being carried out, but I'm not aware of anything at a policy level which is being put in place.
Okay, thank you. As you said, you say on this platform that though Jayanti ma'am believes in one thing, when you have the prayer, where your mind is without fear, your head is held high, right? So Jayanti ma'am is totally like looks after the discipline. She gets angry when there is indiscipline in her. But as far as that mind gets angry, not that heart, right? So the children should know that as a discipline and your career and your achievement go hand in hand. So my request to all children here, I know law is a really, really vast career, and you can do lot of things. One of the student was asking, what about after doing national law school, you pass out? There is lot of opportunity. You can do your masters, you can do your PhD, you can join all judiciary system like Indian judiciary system. So and it's just a vast thing. And Sonali has explained everything so nicely. So children, I hope you are benefited by that. Thank you, Sonali, and thank you, Madhusmita ma'am. Nice job. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. A big thank you to Sonali for so patiently explaining each and every question, so elaborative in her approach. And I think children, they definitely have benefited from whatever you have told today. They must be extremely happy regarding this, because as you heard, many of them were telling like, someone telling us so many things, someone from the field of law. So from that we could deduce that they must have benefited a lot. And Sonali, again a big thank you for an ingenuous gratitude as you disseminated a bouquet of dreams and means to their ends. And a big thank you for inspiring all our scientists today. I think they would always look forward for more sessions with you. Thank you so much. And we also salute our founder and mentor, our chairman, Sir Dr. Vijay Kumar Sahu, whose resolve alone has trounced the pandemic odds to keep us upright and unyielding. And thank you, all the students, for being here, being with us. And I shall be right here again with yet another pearl of Sai International School next time. Till then, goodbye. Goodbye, Sonali.